Okay, call this meeting to order. Kittitas County Public Hospital District Number 1. Before we begin the regular part of the meeting, Julie's asked to introduce a couple of new employees.
These much anticipated new employees. Over here, we have Kyle West, who is a familiar face.
Hi, Kyle.
The new medical staff support services coordinator. So welcome, Kyle. And also, Jeff Yamada is the new Chief Information Officer. He's had 2 days here, so I have to my email this down all day.
I have one as well. I have Kathy Murray here. She's our new clinical manager for Home Health and Hospice. So
Welcome to all three of you. That's great. Glad to have you here. Thanks for coming to the meeting. Okay, now before we get the regular agenda started, we'd like to recognize the KVH Auxiliary and a couple of members of the auxiliary who we have here. So I'd just like to say a few words about the fantastic work they've done for KVH over the years. KVH Auxiliary has a long history of supporting healthcare in Ellensburg. When Kittitas Valley Community Hospital opened its doors to patients on December 29, 1964, the community was already invested in the new hospital. 6 guilds had formed, and each one wanted to contribute in some way to the new hospital. Over time, the guilds eventually consolidated into one group under the KVH Auxiliary, forging a legacy of service fueled not just by bake sales, card games, and dances, but also by operating the hospital's treasure box, gift shop, and espresso stand. Over the last half a century, the KVH Auxiliary has raised over $228,000 to help pay for equipment, training, furnishings, and other wish list items for the hospital. Scholarships in the amount of $45,000 have been awarded to 27 students in medical-related fields. These scholarships will continue to be awarded until the reserves are exhausted. The auxiliary also created the honorary walkway, which winds through the Rose Garden on the south end of the hospital grounds. The walkway features bronze plaques in memory of loved ones. In honor of the work they've done, we have purchased a bronze plaque, which reads, you can see, KVH Auxiliary supporting KVH for over 50 years. That will be placed in this honorary walkway. We have some members of the auxiliary here tonight, so please stand. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling us?
My name is Pam Daly, and I've lived here for 43 years. So my husband and I are invested in the hospital. My husband's going to be president of the foundation board this next year, so we're just kind of continuing the legacy. And I would love to have kept the auxiliary functioning and going, but times have changed, and we're just moving forward with that. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm sure you can still find a lot of members in the community. We have all kinds of information about them if you ever wanted to talk to them, who probably know more about the auxiliary than I do from when it started. So, and this is our director, our volunteer director, who's helped the auxiliary stay functioning.
It's been great. 28 years working with all the guilds and the auxilians, and it's a highlight of what I've been doing. And I just appreciate all the guilds and the volunteers over all of these years that have done all that work. And Pam's been our Madam Secretary for that whole time.
Not quite that whole time.
Well, almost. But thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
And we will continue to distribute those funds for scholarships. So if you hear of students in our community that are continuing education in healthcare, let us know.
Let Karen know.
So you wanted to have one last good deed just on your way out. We're trying to thank you, and you just keep giving back.
That's what we do.
We appreciate that. Bob, we have a little something for you. Bob Davis is going to help out. So on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, KVH employees, and the Ellensburg community, I want to thank you and the many other members of the auxiliary for the many years of dedication and your long-standing commitment to improving healthcare in the area. So thank you very much. Okay. Give that a moment. I don't want to go right into business. That feels good. Yeah, let's sink in a little bit. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. So on to the regular meeting then. We have first off the approval of the agenda. Any changes or additions to the agenda? Hearing none then, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Approve the agenda.
Motion by Erica. Second by Liana. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Unanimous, thank you. Next item on the consent agenda, this includes minutes of the October 22nd and October 25th board meetings, the approval of checks, the foundation report, the finance committee minutes, and the minutes from the quality council, which met on October 15th. Is there anything that anyone wants pulled from the consent agenda, or if not, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Question? We have a special meeting a week ago on Monday. We don't have minutes for that.
Right, I believe that those will be at the next meeting. Yeah. Make a motion. Okay, motion from Bob Davis to approve the consent agenda. Second from Roy. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Unanimous, thank you. All right, next up then we have presentations, starting with Mandy Olson with the Safe Catch Awards.
So we have our, let's see, which quarter is this? This is, a safe catch is something that helps prevent harm to patients or unnecessary expenses, and we have both a clinical award and a non-clinical award, and each of the award winners gets a $100 gift card and plus a banner in their department and a charm they get on their badge. And so first I'll give our clinical award today, and there are two winners, Tana Kandata, RN from Home Health and Hospice, and then Anna Collins, one of our geriatric nurse practitioners who couldn't be with us here tonight. So they were nominated by Rhonda Holden and Terry Barr for heroic actions. So KVH staff came upon the scene of an accident involving a driver that ran into a telephone pole. 911 was called but had not yet arrived. A fire started under the vehicle and appeared to be spreading. The driver was confused and hesitant to move out of his vehicle, but our staff members worked to convince him to get out of the car. He ended up swinging his legs out of the car and fell to the ground. Our staff dragged him away from the burning vehicle to safety. So a truly heroic and amazing
Yeah, what was more exciting?
Yeah, I heard it was right. Was this right across from your house?
It was right in front of our house. Yeah, Steve ran and he said, "There's an accident out here. We need you." And I walk out, and Anna, right by that time, was calling 911 and couldn't get him out. Another girl had stopped. Finally, he said, "I got him to put his feet out," and he went to the ground and he had overalls on. And he grabbed him by his overall straps and dragged him across the road. So, yeah, it was pretty exciting.
We're appreciative of you and all you do for our patients and people that aren't even your patients.
Yes. He ended up being our patient.
All right.
For a referral.
So now for our non-clinical award, this is to Amy Diaz, the quality data analyst. She was nominated by myself for helping to ensure recruitment and retention efforts can be made with data accuracy. This is a little bit long one, but when KVH facilities are designated as health professional shortage area, our clinicians may be eligible for loan repayment or other scholarship programs. These programs are essential in recruiting and retaining skilled talent to our community and other rural communities throughout the state. Amy was submitting data to the Washington State Department of Health to maintain our designation when she noticed the system seemed to be looping her back through the beginning when she submitted data. Amy was concerned this meant the data wasn't submitted. She followed up with the Department of Health and who found a coding error that was affecting all facilities entering data. The state said, quote, "I want to thank you because if it were not for your follow-up efforts, I would not have found this error, which could have been detrimental in our data collecting efforts. Because of Amy's persistence in ensuring data quality, KVH is compliant with reporting requirements of the program, and all communities in the state will be able to correctly enter data." I'll shake your hand. And that's it for Safe Catches.
Congratulations.
Amanda, can I grab you? Yeah, we're going to take a picture. We're going to.
Okay. Next up, we have a presentation from Ginger Haver from the Ellensburg School District and Brian Aiken regarding the bond and the district update.
Yes, so I'm flying solo tonight, but so I'm Ginger.
Brian, right?
So thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here at the board meeting. Originally, we were going to present about the bond proposal, and we, of course, are thrilled that our bond was approved. So just a quick update on that. We are going to be, we've already bought land north of Mount Stewart, and we will start really looking at how to prepare that land. We approved our architect last night at our board meeting, and are pretty excited about just really moving forward. Part of that step will be doing a listening tour in January. I'll be going around and meeting. Would love to be able to come back at that point and show you a slideshow of some of the buildings that our new architect has built in the past. But what's really important to me and to our board is really getting your input as community members, parents, around what's important to you around teaching and learning in our schools. And so we'd love to have an opportunity to come back and do that. We're also going to use those monies to renovate Mount Stewart and Lincoln Elementary Schools. New roof, we'll have a brand new gym or fitness space at Lincoln, which will be great for our community because of all the basketball and all the different recreational sports. Having a good space for that is pretty slim. So we will be adding another space for that. And so we're very excited about that. We have 475 students in portables right now. And this bond will allow our students have that forever home in a brick and mortar school, and also allow us to expand. We're also adding classrooms to Mount Stewart and Lincoln as well. The other thing that's very exciting, and I think could involve some partnership with all of you at the hospital, is we recently received over $300,000 in grants for both crime prevention as well as mental health. And so we intend to do extensive training with our staff around youth mental health as well as the QPR training, question, persuasion, referral. In my last district, in Cooter School District in Fort Collins, we trained every single staff member, classified and certified in QPR. And for 2 years, we didn't have any incidents of suicide. Our risk assessments doubled, which was a good thing because people actually were noticing the signs and symptoms of students who may be thinking of harming themselves or others. And so we definitely are going to use those monies to do some widespread training there. But if so, I'm gonna hand these over to Julie, and if you are interested in looking at, those are the abstracts of our grants, and you can see a place to partner with us, that'd be great. The other thing that I'm super excited about, and Julie and I had a chance to meet about this in the summer, is we really want to expand our career pathways. And one of the pathways that are really important to us are health sciences. And we would love to explore the possibility at some point of having a partnership with the hospital and our health community around giving students opportunities for internships or apprenticeships. I worked with the Department of Labor in Fort Collins, and we worked with Columbine Health as well. And working together, we were able to look at the standards and make some adjustments. And as I was leaving Fort Collins, Columbine Health had an apprenticeship program in place where students who are even younger than 18 are able to go through and get their CNA certification and go directly work, not only work as an apprenticeship, but also receive high school as well as some college credit for that. And so I'm working on my end with the counselors and our high school and our board around how can we create a system like that. So would love to explore that as a possibility for the community at some point as well. So I'd be glad to answer any questions if you guys need. Yes?
I have a question. Please don't interpret this as a hostile question, but why are there so many late start and early release students? It seems to me that this is inordinate, and I don't understand the rationale. School gets out at 3 o'clock. Why can't teacher training and a lot of the activities that happen during those early release and late start days be done outside of school hours?
No, I appreciate that question. And the late starts are for professional learning communities within our schools. And what the professional learning communities do is it allows teachers to meet together every week to talk about what are some common assessments that maybe we might want to create around content, around units that we have. Let's share student work with each other and see and share best ideas. What are you doing for your students that's really working around molecular formulas, for example, or something like that, and let's share our best ideas around that, and let's share our data. And there is research by John Hattie, who's an educational researcher, that he looks at what are some of those factors that really affect student achievement. And one of the things that they find is when you give teachers regular time to build those real strong, high-performing teams, I'm sure you guys have high-performing teams within the hospital as well, it creates that sense of collective teacher efficacy. And what John Hattie found is that's like anything that's a 0.4 effect size. He does meta-analysis with different research that's been done with education. Anything above a 0.4 is significant in affecting student achievement. And teacher collective efficacy is actually a 1.57, which is much higher than almost anything, any other the types of research that he's done. And so in order for that to happen, you really need that regular time. And so that late start is really, the intent of that time is to support teachers in having that regular time to meet. And by contract, we have a contract with teachers. There's a set time for teaching. And of course, we negotiate that with the teachers union. And so in order to build that time in the school day, that late start allows us to do that. My job, being new as a new superintendent, which I have, there are late start Mondays, so every Monday morning I block that time out on my calendar, and I'm in the process of going around and really checking out what is the quality of that time and how can I support those professional learning communities of teachers so that they are doing that work to their best capacity on building that teacher collective efforts.
Thank you.
The quality of teaching time is more important than quantity.
That's exactly right.
That's right. I believe that.
Yeah. But, you know, those of us who are I mean, there are a lot of families out there with two-income couples, and you know, it can pose a problem. I mean, you know, some of us have jobs that are flexible, but it's kind of hard. I mean, I think it was at Morgan just recently where they had early release for a week and a half or something, ostensibly for teacher-parent conferences, but I think we had 2 hours of teacher-parent conferences, and they had a week of, you know, 2.5 hours for, you know, an hour and a half or something. Seems a little fishy there. Maybe I need to look up yeah. So anyway, yeah, I mean, I get it. The late start, I get, but there are a lot of early releases, and I mean, my concern is that yeah, we want quality over quantity, but we like both. Anyway.
But I appreciate you putting that on my radar screen. I can definitely keep an eye on that and see how that's being used. I think that's really important to monitor.
Any other questions about, especially, she she brought up some interesting partnerships that we might have and some internships with various volunteer opportunities.
And since Ginger's arrival, she's been active on the Kidney County Health Network also, so opportunities to join the grant.
And this sounds like a really interesting project to keep an eye on students' sort of mental health and their propensity to violence. Seems like very important work.
I appreciate that. I actually have a health background myself. I'm actually a registered nurse as well as a teacher, and now a superintendent, was a principal in the central office and all those things. But so I really do have a passion though for health and for especially for mental health. I had a chance to work as a psychiatric nurse for a while, way back at the Clita Wallace Center in Colorado, and it really is important. I think sometimes mental illness can be overlooked, and it's important for us to know the signs and symptoms and be able to support it, just like we would support diabetes, a student with diabetes, or any other kind of health issue.
You caught my attention in a very positive way with mentioning the partnership with apprenticeship with high school students. I grew up in Vancouver, Washington, and they have a Henrietta Lacks biosciences high school there.
Oh, wow.
Was not there when I was growing up. I missed it by that much, but I would have loved that opportunity. And while that is it's a large facility, just moving in that direction, bringing opportunity nearer to the kids who might otherwise write that off as not a possibility because of their family situation and demographic. I think that this is really exciting.
We actually have I'm just continuing to learn about what we have available at the high school. We just started computer science classes there and cybersecurity. So we also have coding now, elementary, middle, and high school. So we're looking at what kind of a STEM pathway could be great. But we actually have a biomedical class right now that one of our science teacher teaches, or she has in the past. I just started talking to her about it, just ran into her the other day. So I'm excited to see what are the classes that are already in place at the high school, what are teachers' interests, and then really building the pathways from there. And then what are the, as a community, what are your interests and what you'd like to see at the school? How could we develop our students so that they could be strong candidates as employees for you here at the hospital?
One other item, just thinking back on Vancouver again, we have the skill center that there are high school students that they can sign up for years at the skill center and they can graduate with their AA. And I know that Running Start is an option for kids locally. That's maybe another vocational training direction to look at. The name of the class at the high school you said for the biomedical.
I want to say it's a biotech class, but what I'll do is I'll look into it and I'll send you a picture. I know she's taught in the past. I had the impression that she was teaching it this year, but I'll find out. Thank you.
Welcome to the area.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate that. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll do public comment announcements now. So this is a public meeting, and so this is our time for public announcements. If you have any statements you'd like to make now, please keep it to 2 minutes, and please start by saying your name and address. Is there anyone here who would like to make a public statement? Okay, seeing no hands. Then we'll move on. Thank you. On to reports and dashboards. First, quality. Mandy Olson.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add in the report, except that I did provide an example of one of the reports that we're able to get out of Press-Ganey. And if you look on the dashboard, for patient satisfaction, one of the things Carrie's pointed out to me is just how much it can move around in one quarter. And so just knowing on our dashboard, so this is data we've taken from Press-Ganey, And that last data point there is the most recent quarter, so it is incomplete and it can change over time. But so far we've been mostly very pleased with a lot of the accessibility and the ease of use with Press Ganey, and for the most part a lot of their tools have been really helpful. I will be bringing a presentation to QI Council to go into a little more detail about what we're learning, but it is, since we have transitioned just as of July, it's really hard to do a comprehensive report on the data at this point. So we just need to, we're still working out some of the kinks with the way the data files are sorted in Press Ganey once they're sent there. Like, can I look by position or by unit, how we're looking at the different data elements. Do you have questions for me?
I do.
Sure.
Regarding the sepsis metric, it was trending along great, and then it faltered a bit, and now it's back up to great again.
Yeah.
Was there a redoubled effort on that?
Yes. They've done some, they've had an improvement team working on it, a little task force to reinvigorate some efforts. And I do think a little of that had to do with understanding new workflows with Cerner. And fortunately too, with all of those, the process metric, we may not have met it, but the outcomes for the patient were okay. So the patient was okay in all those cases.
And is this the bundles? Is this meeting the bundles?
This one, this measure in particular isn't a group of measures. It's just, there are lots of elements in the measure, but it's an all or nothing. So if you miss the lactic acid or the fluid volume amount or an assessment, then you fail a whole measure.
And that's timing as well, too, right? Like within a certain amount of time,
yes.
Doing those measures. Wow, well that's especially great then if it's a little bit.
Yes, and previously with where we are at 100%, that was not typical of, so we compare ourselves to other Press Ganey users. It was too late to get into the report, but we did receive an award for Press Ganey for how many measures that we were able to achieve 85% or above. It's the Guardian of Excellence Award. They had, what is it called, Michelle? When we can't release something. Embargoed the announcement at that point. So, but as of November 3rd, we could start advertising that. But, so that really is, even when we faltered, that's much better than many organizations across the United States have been able to do.
I have a quick question on the Press Ganey surveys.
Yes.
Are these by mail? Are these electronic, telephone?
It depends on, none are by telephone any longer. None are by phone. If you are an inpatient or you have an outpatient surgery, ambulatory surgery, or you're in the clinic, you might get one by mail. If you visit the emergency department, urgent care, lab, imaging, rehab, or cardiopulmonary services, those are called e-surveys, and it either comes via text or an email.
This is on the Press Ganey.
Yep.
This may be more of a question for you, Dr. Martin, or you, Dr. O'Brien. I know, Dr. Martin, you're particularly interested in this, but staff talk about pain treatments. I mean, 65% put us in the top box, and we're still only in the 20-something percentile rank. I mean, could other hospitals be talking too much about pain? Because as a result of all the opioid issues, maybe that's not such a bad thing that we're not constantly talking about pain. So,
are you looking at the hospice measure or
number 20? Yeah, on page 21, I'm looking specifically at some of this stuff.
How often staff talk about pain?
Yeah.
Is talk about different from asking you if you're in pain or asking?
This measure did recently change.
Okay.
It used to say how well was your pain managed, and so many pay-for-performance hospitals would then potentially have different reimbursement rates based on their scores on this. And there was this outcry that they felt that was contributing to the opioid epidemic, that your rewarding organizations that give more pain medication to patients, right? If they're, say their pain is better managed. So they just did recently this year change the way the questions asked about how often staff talk about pain or pain treatment and not how well was your pain managed. So we may see a shift even still in this data. It's a new question to patients. Put it this way.
The reason for my question is because specifically in hospice, we use a different set of metrics, and in the SHIP metrics, it's a survey question that's asked 3 to 6 months after the patient passes or discharges from hospice. And it's a question, were the pain medications discussed in the initial visit? And a lot of times that's an exercise in memory.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, we've been trying to do things to remind families that we can in fact discuss those at the first visit, like handing a piece of paper that's circled and says we'll talk about it.
That being said, this is a good opportunity to say, you know, when we're doing the bedside rounding, are we making sure that we're talking about pain management with the patient at that time and saying, okay, let's make sure we talk about pain while you're here. So this is really will help us identify those areas we want to focus on.
It leaves the door open for other pain management modalities other than just medications.
And if you flip to page 23, this is where, HealthStream has this also, but this is where they prioritize the metrics and how closely it correlates with our overall score. And that is the one that they put right there on the top. So that really helps us narrow our focus instead of, you know, trying to look at every single measure. That's their way of helping us prioritize what we would look at as well.
Okay. Any other questions from me? Congratulations on the recognition.
It's not me, the staff are the ones who...
I wasn't talking to you. That's great. Thank you. Okay. Next up, the CEO.
So you should have found a packet of additional information to replace. This is we do have a number of new folks in the organization, so I will be reviewing this with Adam and team next Tuesday. I've already been spell checked to death on it, but every misspelled name has been brought to my attention. But this is more or less where the organization sits right now with the new Chief Financial Officer, Scott Olander, and Chief Information Officer, Jeff Yamada, our CFO Emeritus, who would be all good because you're a little loud. So we will be working on this, but this is sort of the state of the organization at this point.
Can you tell me why some of the significance of the boxes that are not colored?
Those are positions that report up to the box above it. So Micah Bruner reports to Ron Berlocker, and Deb Bruner reports to Kimberly Teller up to Becky. So they have separate departments, but there's a reporting structure that they can.
Okay.
And the folks that are in red are senior. Or admins. The second document that you have in here is an update on the multi-payer plan. And the Rural Health Committee of the Washington State Hospital Association, of which I am a member, was meeting somewhat routinely with the Healthcare Authority to talk about this, and there was a lot of frustration that we weren't making any progress. So there's not a lot of consensus about where this ought to be going or even what the issues are. So they created a smaller team, and we've had our first conference call with the Healthcare Authority to try to, A, change the tone of our engagement. I think we need to stop being, the consensus is we need to stop being passive and really establish what our principles are and sort of what the no-go zones are as far as the Healthcare Authority's global budget is concerned.
Excuse me, what page are you on?
It's the supplemental package.
Oh,
yeah. So what they did, which I think is really nice, is the Hospital Association invited the executive directors of the 2 rural networks to this subcommittee as well. And And the reason that's important is the hospital association is kind of hamstrung in that there are conflicts among their membership, and it is a membership organization. So they're in this discussion, there are winners and losers. The two networks are more discreet, and we have a lot more candid conversations in those small groups. And both of those executive directors are very good at advocating for their collaboratives. So that's the group moving forward. We did come to the table initially with some principles about it being voluntary, the autonomy for the direction of care needs to stay in the community, and we really are going to go back and reinforce some of those things. So my focus is, and KBH is one of the hospitals that they're trying to model under this global payment structure right now. I'm thinking they're having a difficult time with their modeling data. But my focus right now is less on the transition and more on, because a tremendous amount of discussion is happening about that. How will we be paid? When will the money come? What about claims management? I'm really focused on what their vision for rural healthcare is 5 and 10 years out. I'm concerned that they think decisions can be made in Olympia, that all rural communities really need the same thing. It's a matter of getting patients over the hill or down the street to big facilities.
Discuss this in Chelan, right? Yeah. The picture of how the hubs and spokes and that sort of thing.
So that to me is, it's not that I'm not concerned about the transition, but I think really safeguarding rural communities' ability to flex, to serve what are truly the needs of their community and not what some government-appointed panel in Olympia thinks rural communities need. So we may come to the point, and again, this is, the Healthcare Authority is Apple Health, all of the Medicaid plans, the PED, the teachers' benefit plan, and they are trying to get a waiver from CMS to include Medicare patients in this as well. So it would be a huge chunk of most rural facilities, patient populations coming under an entirely new reimbursement scheme. At this point, it is voluntary. CMS has signaled that they're not very pleased with that. The NCOs, or managed care organizations that currently handle all the Medicaid programs, need to get them on board in some fashion. So there's a lot of work to be done, and the Healthcare Authority thinks they're going to be ready to pull the trigger for January 1, 2020. So,
yeah, and there was a question about whether we wanted to kind of get in early.
Yeah. So there may be, my issue with this, and again, the reason I think we need to look a little farther down the road, is the Healthcare Authority is looking to spend less money to provide care. The reason rural healthcare struggles is because they're not paying enough. Government payers are not paying for the cost of care. So we're starting behind the 8 ball already. So I think that's part of the equation that we allow to go unchallenged up front. And so we need to correct that. But by the same token, once they find a model that they like, it may be voluntary, but they're going to make it impossible for you to live in the model that they built on.
So we'll be
voluntold. So you start squeezing out, no longer get 100% of cost for Medicaid, you would get 90% of cost for Medicaid. Only, these programs would be available to do procedure-based medicine for PET employees, things like that. So I think I think it's something we really need to look at, depending on where they go with this. And one of the big issues is going to be whether our global payment is for care provided by our delivery system or to our beneficiaries, which is a world of difference. So if it's delivered within our delivery system, then we have a medical staff who's been ready to go at population health for 5 years now, 6 years now. You stop being incentivized to do procedures, you really can get in front of some of the social determinants of health and some of the long-term causes of healthcare costs. If you're responsible for beneficiary costs, that's still a very we may, again, it may be the position of the rural hospitals, and this is rural only, that no one steps forward, and that might be, I don't know what happens at that point. It may be that we collectively go to our congressional delegation and ask for a letter to be written to CMS asking them to not participate in the waiver. Or we can decide we got through the program and we should, I don't know.
Then this is also tied in with the Centers of Excellence. Is this the same?
So the head is joined at the hip, or healthcare authority is joined at the hip with the BREE collaborative. The BREE collaborative, and we have folks in quality who pay close attention to the policies that they put forth. But yes, quantity equals quality is the direction that the BREE collaborative is going. So lots of moving parts. And certainly worth paying attention to, and it is a very sophisticated conversation, and we can't, without paying them down to details, it's really hard for us to model what this might even look like to us in the short term, let alone the long. So that's just an update on that. And this is, I gave you a little tiny version, but I am doing employee forums next week on the 5th and the 6th update for the Elm. And I just wanted to share with you that the tone of this really is, we're talking about cost containment, we're talking about reducing the budget 2019 over 2018. And I want to begin to have a really candid conversation with the staff about what the challenges are for us and how we want to move forward with them in partnership in really maintaining the financial health that this organization enjoys right now. So one of the graphs, so what I did is I looked at public district hospitals, and then I also looked at critical access hospitals, and I think this might have turned out to be an exercise in entertaining Julie. I'm not sure anybody else will find it useful. But of the public district hospitals in the state, the largest by asset size is Valley Renton. You can see Kittitas is the blue line there. We're one of the larger critical access hospitals. Valley Renton is $681 million in asset size, or $82 million. And then down here, the smallest is Quincy at $3,555,000. I also put equity on here because you can see the two largest are Valley Renton and Evergreen. And
They're extended too far.
well, so Evergreen has a lot more borrowing capacity, a much stronger equity position than you see in Renton. When you look over at Quincy, and I don't mean to pick on Quincy, but you never want brackets around your equity position, just for future reference. So they owe more than they own. And there are 4 hospitals in the state. Trios is not as underwater as Snoqualmie is, but there are 4, Trios, Snoqualmie, Monroe, and Quincy that needed equity. The point here, and there really was a point when I started this, is that when you've seen one hospital right now, you've seen one hospital. The strengths and the weaknesses and sort of what we have to deal with is very different than what other hospitals are dealing with. And this, just by asset size, if you're only looking at critical access hospitals, you can see that Kittitas Valley Healthcare is the 4th largest. And even when you look at just critical access hospitals, when you get beyond KDH in gross revenue, in services that we provide, it is by and large a very different group of hospitals. When most of the hospitals to the right side of KDH don't care whether the BREE collaborative is going after centers of excellence for surgical procedures because they don't do surgical procedures. Most of them don't deliver babies. So there's not sort of a critical mass of issues that even a critical access hospital is dealing with together. And then ranked by revenue. The reason this is important is when you look at where critical access hospitals are, between their gross charges and their net charges, you can see that like a hospital like Valley Renton is, gross revenue is a surrogate for effort or energy that you go in, you put into generating services. They're having to do twice as much work essentially to collect the dollars KDH.
Why is that? Can you briefly explain?
Again, that's the benefit of our rural health clinics and our critical access status. So those are the PPS hospitals, those are the prospective payment hospitals that are getting 22 cents on the dollar. We have a couple of rural hospitals that are not represented here because they're not public district hospitals like Toppenish, literally collects 20 cents on the dollar. So they generate $100 million in gross charges and operate on a budget of $20 million. So, and Sunnyside is very similar to that because, well, Sunnyside is critical access, but it's not public district hospital. So with just the critical access hospitals ranked by revenue, you can see, again, KDH is number 4. One of the things that I thought was interesting here, again, our collection ratio is much better than the 3 larger critical access hospitals. But if you look at the 2 rural university, Pullman and KDH, right next to one another, we have a very similar revenue profile. And Pullman does some very creative things. I think that's a partnership. We're just learning some of the things that they're doing that might be helpful. But so again, we're 131 million. We collect 70 million. Whitby, which is does a lot with the base over there with the military. It collects twice as much revenue for about 30 million more in charge. And for some reason, is it Odessa? Net revenue is greater than the gross revenue. I don't even want to know why that is.
How do they do that?
I don't know.
Yeah, can we get some
No,
notes on that?
that was Quincy.
I was gone. I had nothing to do with that.
So, and then the next one, this is a good one because we're on the right side of the bar.
Yeah.
On this one. So, and you can see that again, KDH is very fortunate in our payer mix, fortunate on our balance sheet, and this is why I want to have the conversation with the staff. We have a duty to continue this legacy so that we can continue to invest in healthcare in the community. But in 2017, Trios or Kennewick General lost $28,721,000. So spend a moment with that number. It also in 2018 was sold to a for-profit chain. Grace Harbor received a special appropriation from the state legislature, which is one of the reasons the state legislature is so interested in this transformative reimbursement scheme for rural. They don't like having to bail out individual hospitals, and Grace Harbor, they were not very happy about doing that, and Grace Harbor will need another one.
Is it Grace Harbor the sickest county?
Yes. And they have terrible payer mix. They don't have another, there's a critical access hospital in Gracetown County, Grace Harbor, but there's not really another close tertiary care center, so they get everything. The big winner in 2017 was Evergreen with $14,600,000. But you can see KDH again, we did well. And then I also wanted to point out, again, talking to the folks who were asking to think about cost containment and asking to partner with us on how we can do things better, need to understand the challenges in this district. And this is the operating levies for the public district hospitals in the state of Washington. Valley Renton collects $23,079,000. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, they lost
20.
So 50.
Yeah.
What's your point? Maybe I'm not understanding. Well, they collected 23 million in taxpayer money. Even with that 23 million, they lost roughly the same amount.
Yeah,
So
the chart above it shows
yeah,
the
shows
second
how much
from the
they
left over there.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. So
Yes, I
without the
see.
levy, they would have lost 50 million.
So this is only the operating levy. This is not any UCGO You can see that we are way over on the right-hand side. Whitman in Colfax is the only one that collects exactly 0. And I went out to the county assessor's websites to get these numbers. Colfax does have a UTG of just over $1 million, but we are the second to the lowest at 8,730, which you just recently inflated to 8,900.
That indicates critical access.
Yes.
Well, I have a couple comments. First, this is not just about entertaining Julie. This is extremely valuable information because it contextualizes where we are and helps us understand where we need to be going. And in some senses, we're in a good position, but it's in jeopardy as the future evolves and healthcare costs go up and reimbursement goes down. So, as we're talking about working with the staff to develop cost containment measures, this is really useful in providing a basis for understanding why we need to do what we need to do.
Well, and why do we do it now?
As long as we do it now. The other thing that strikes me is the financial sustainability group is grappling with maybe more specific questions, but this information is really valuable in helping us understand how we craft a plan for the future. And finally, it helps if we eventually need to make the case that we really need to go to the taxpayers and have a better operating budget. This is just prima facie evidence that that is absolutely necessary. So, bravo. This is
Thank you.
Very good work.
Thank you. So, I didn't want you to be hearing that employees to be hearing things that you weren't familiar with, but we'll be talking about this. I am sure the reduction in the PTO cap for the non-contract folks will come up, and I'll be ready to address that as well. But we'll have some good conversation about stewardship and fiscal responsibility and cost containment. I also have for each of you, and Ron Erlacher is allowing me to pass these out with a whole stack of disclaimers. These are working copies of the pre-designed work on the MAC building. In this, you will find a construction budget, keeping in mind how much different the project budget can be from the construction budget. And I don't expect you to do anything with these right now. I just knew that most of you would be interested in being able to see where we were at. So that's yours to peruse. But again, Ron has an arm full of disclaimers.
Well, particularly after the tour we had on October 22nd, this is helpful.
I had a novel to read over winter break. I think I'd rather look at this.
Just a quick reminder, since I was out of town for that tour, I'd still like to have it, and I'm wondering how you can have it. I'll talk to you.
Mandy and I make that happen.
I want to set that up. Thank you.
I wanted to have Carrie make a brief update on Teamsters negotiations and open enrollment.
So as you guys know, we have 2 separate Teamsters collective bargaining agreements. One we just finished and ratified recently for the RTs. The second was for our service workers, which covers materials management, food nutrition, environmental services, and of course our patient care technicians out on the units. So that contract is coming up to expire at the end of this year. We just had our first bargaining session with them just Tuesday of this week. We had really good representation from the clinical side, from our PCTs, and also from our materials tech side, but not quite as much representation we'd like to see from our environmental services and food nutrition. So they're actually going to work on their end to make sure we get some more presentation or representation from them. Both sides feel that we're starting from a really good and solid contract. There's just sort of the usual things that they've volleyed over to us, some issues around economics, some issues around benefits that they'd like to discuss, and we'll be meeting again next Friday, hopefully to ratify and have something to you guys, fingers crossed. I shouldn't even say because I'm going to jinx it soon. That's all I'll say. I don't want to jinx it. They went really well.
It's a good group to negotiate
It
with.
is.
And again, I appreciate sort of the relationship that their representative Carl and Kirk, our attorneys, seem to be able to really talk about what's real. And we also have people like Vicki and Ron at the table who, when things come up about rest between shifts or oddball, we can say, no, wait a minute. when did that happen? And let's not put in a contract something that happened once 3 years ago. Let's just say.
I would like to take a moment to kudos HR for the transition to the new insurance plan. The new insurance plan, the Premera moving from the TAP to the American plan, it is Premera Blue Cross, right? I always get this one, they're all the same. But I was in HR before coming in. They had some questions. They got the questions answered. They handed over one single form on one side, and it was done, which was incredible. And I just figured you guys had so much fun doing it last year. You want to do it again.
We love it, and we look forward to doing it again.
It seems like it's been going so smoothly. Has that been your experience?
It actually has, and thank you for that. It's really been sort of a village effort to make that look that simple. But it has gone really well. We have over half of our employees that need to do something have already done it. We're about halfway through open enrollment. We've had very few disgruntled or quite unhappy folks coming in. More so, it's been very inquisitive and very thankful to not have to select from reams and reams of paper or scrolling through numerous websites. So
I enjoyed reading through the benefits, and they're tremendous. I think it's a great improvement.
That was a lot of heavy lifting on Libby's part, so that kudos to you that way.
Yeah,
for
thank
that.
you. Yeah, agree to pass that to the organization.
Okay. Well, thank you.
So one of my goals for this year, which I'm going behind the 8 ball on, is to establish a committee or a process for the medical staff and a couple of board members and some administrative representation to look at incentive and compensation for our providers. We are on December 6th, we'll be interviewing a gentleman whose name is Jim Cunningham. He has for years ran the Swedish clinic system and has a lot of experience with incentive programs. So on December 6th, I think the two of you and Dr. Martin and I will be meeting with Jim to see if it feels like a good fit. Again, a lot of experience. He's also a pretty laid-back guy, but besides just financial components of this, there's also components of culture and respect, and some of which Dr. Martin's going to be talking about a little later also.
So his role would be
facilitator. I wanted to remind you that the Foundation Board's social is on December 6th at 5 p.m. at the Hospital Company. And then I also today, and maybe I'll say it in a lower vote, Commissioner Claire Hines from District 2 signaled her intention to resign from her position on the very December meeting. So District 2 will be looking for a commissioner here within next year. And this week I got to do late night leadership with CWU, and I found out just how much smarter CWU students are than I am. But we had a good turnout, and I got to we're doing that, but there were probably 50 or 60 students there, and I'm sure they were there for me and not for the raffle drawing and free food. So, and the last thing...
Hey, alum, it's an alum made good.
That's right. So
that's great. It's
and
good for them to see
that there are jobs out there. And if you haven't had a chance to look at the conference in Arizona coming up in February, I just wanted to remind you that Nancy's working in for and that's all I have.
We have, and then Memphis and Clark.
Yep.
Is that under?
Can you use the mic, please?
Oh, yes.
Thank you very much.
My booming voice, right?
Yeah, I'm going to put it right in front of you. All right. So every year the Compliance Committee develops a work plan based off of what we believe the priorities are to address for improvements. And so I just gave you a summary showing you where we're at. Are we meeting our targets? And one of the things I wanted to point out to you is that one of the areas that we felt was really needing some attention was the security risk assessment to identify where we really have areas that are increasing our risk of having security breakdowns. And so
we were able to accomplish that this week. On Monday and Tuesday, we had some individual from CERN, the regulatory compliance and security practice team. His name is Mike, and he appeared to be very knowledgeable. Everyone I've spoken to stated that he appeared to be very thorough and also had a good background to really understand what those risks were, had good resources that he could offer readily, and that he would have a comprehensive report out within, I believe, about 4 to 6 weeks, and then that actually would be reported out to the compliance committee right away as well, to let us know what we need to do to improve our security and our information systems. So, and also, I did meet briefly with Jeff, a new Chief of Information Officer, and he seems, again, also to be very knowledgeable and be ready to tackle some of these areas himself. One other thing I wanted to know, we do have had an improvement in our rate of completing the conflict of interest disclosure statements, so the target was to ensure that all board members and leadership and providers do complete one, so we could be sure we had an evaluation of that, and we're up to 93%, and so we feel strongly that we're going to meet that target by the end of the year. Any questions regarding the summary and the goals for the work plan?
Did the cybersecurity risk assessment take place or get completed by November 26th, earlier this week?
Yeah, so Monday and Tuesday were on-site dates for him to do the assessment, and then he's taking his findings back and summarizing what he found and having good references to support our work on that.
Okay.
But actually doing the assessment qualified us for meaningful use.
Yes.
So that's what,
$43,000 is what we thought of avoided penalties.
And one of the things they noted too on the requirements for that is there may be areas that may be a challenge for us to address right away, but as long as we have a plan in place, how to mitigate it to the greatest extent possible, seems to satisfy all those requirements. Good start.
Any questions?
An enormous chunk to fight off.
Any questions? Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
And is that it for you, Julie?
All right. Unless you have questions.
Any questions for Julie? Okay, thank you very much. Now on to the medical staff, Chief of Staff, Dr. O'Brien.
Okay, we have a short, really short list here of we have the two initial appointments. There's a group list, first practitioner of family medicine over here at Onward, and Pushit Bar, who's a hospitalist. Both initial appointments we're recommending may be approved. And Lauren Music, the reappointments are Lauren Music, PA, ED Emerging Care, Abel Lee, the ophthalmic surgeon, Daniel Hack, Yakima Radiology, and Arthur Chen, hospitalist that works here occasionally, recommending their reappointments.
Everybody on the board has had a chance to review those files. I don't think there were any concerns in this group. Are there any issues or anything you'd like to discuss? All right, then do I have a motion?
I move approval of the request for credentials for those listed on page 42.
Second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving this list of initial appointments and reappointments on page 42, please say aye. Aye. Unanimous, thank you. Dr. O'Brien.
That's it.
Dr. Martin, you're up. Chief Medical Officer.
So, in terms of medical staff services, you guys have my report in front of you. Ms. Engel is continuing to work to the staff plan. In October, we had 3 new applications and 6 interviews. We have 2 providers in the pipeline to come on board with FME, and a third nurse, another nurse practitioner that we're expecting once she completes her training. We'll probably be making an offer to. Lisa Potter has been, I'm pretty sure there's something in the county that she's not involved in, but I haven't yet identified it. In terms of our wound care services, for the first time since we opened our doors, we actually have capacity. So we'll be working to build some referral networks. And Michelle Worrell is working with that as well. And we'll be getting Mary Newlands out in the community a little bit more to try to bolster that. We're starting to look into a pulmonary rehab program. That's going to be a tough nut to crack. We have a lot to learn, in particular about the economics of that service line. Met with our rural health consultant, and it appears we probably would be able to get rural health rates for telepsych, but she's doing some more investigation there, and there's more to come on that front. Palliative care is going to be an interesting one as well. I think that's going to be an easier one to build a reasonable pro forma for. And I think there's going to be we're going to find that there's a lot of need there. We've started looking into a swing bed unit, being able to flex some of our beds when we're at low census, and have started exploring that. We're probably, I believe we're the only critical access in the hospital in the state that isn't currently using some of our beds as swing beds. At the other end of the spectrum is Snoqualmie Valley, which is using all of their beds as swing beds essentially. If you look back to Julie's exercise in entertaining Julie, I don't know that they're feeling good about the return on investment. They are one of the ones that has a little bit of an orange dip below the line on the first graph. Just since I wrote this, we're kind of resetting the conversation around county corrections. It's been very problematic for us to offer the county what they hope for, simply because we don't have the unused staff capacity to provide an extra 6 hours a week of clinical time plus 24/7 call coverage. So we're trying to partner with them and come up with some creative solutions that will meet their needs. But we're kind of doing a reset on that, and there'll be more meetings going forward. You met Kyle earlier, so I won't say any more about that. He's working on 10 new appointments, 9 reappointments, and 10 students. My plate.
Could you briefly explain just a little bit more for me what the medical staff services coordinator does?
So Kyle is principally responsible for making sure that all of the packets for appointment and reappointment are complete, that the references are checked, the T's crossed, the I's dotted. He additionally works in coordinating credentialing. A lot of that is done by an outside contractor.
This is the person who replaced Susan.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize that title, but you don't need to explain more. I know exactly what it is.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries. October, we accepted a couple of resignations, as you know, Dr. Breeden and Dr. Mondo, and are saddened to see them go. We wish them the best. I believe this might actually have been announced previously, but the $50,000, about $49,000 that the county was going to get through the County Health Network for social determinants. You knew about that. Earlier this month, that amount doubled. And so Julie and I continue to work with the ACH.
What drove that company?
More money fell from Healthcare Authority, and ACH is basically trying to function as a pass-through for that at this point.
A lot of these projects they get reserved money to see if something else can come up that comes in the cycle, so they're releasing reserves.
We've had a couple of meetings with practice transformation coaches from the ACH. Again, we're targeting 3 clinics, or 3 sites, the hospital, Family Medicine Cleon, and Family Medicine Ellensburg, for practice transformation. In addition to staff support and expertise, we're also giving $140,000 per site for that work. As an aside, after 2.5 years of wandering around talking about the importance of tightening up and improving the quality of services for the elderly and increasing our capacity to support aging in place, people are starting to come to me and ask about how they can be part of it. So this is becoming a pivotal time, and I'm hoping to have some exciting stuff to bring back in the near future. I'm going to skip the next bullet because I'm going to bore you with that one in a minute. On the 19th, I attended a meeting of the Washington Rural Health Collaborative Physicians Leadership Committee. And there's been some interesting talks there about how we can collaborate across rural health settings, including things like, if we have a couple of hospitals in proximity, could we conceivably share partial FTEs for providers? So if we need a half-time hospitalist and Mason needs a half-time hospitalist, is there a way that we can collaborate for that position? Because it's easier to recruit a full FTE than a couple of 0.5s. That might eventually extend to a job board or even potentially a locums board. Lastly, at Home Health, we've begun piloting Tiger Connect, which is a secure platform for texting that is HIPAA compliant. One of the things that a lot of our providers in different settings have danced with over the years is the temptation to use technology in ways that aren't HIPAA compliant, which results in text messages like the person that you know who used to live behind the barn with the belly pain is doing worse than what would you like me to do. Whereas now, especially for my hospice patients, I can get messages that actually tell me what's going on and who it is and have some knowledge. We're looking at another platform as well, but we're expecting to have something deployed and start looking at where in the organization we can use that to improve care. Any questions so far?
Can you remind me, dermatology, how is that? How many days a week is that?
Right now, it's Megan DeSelms is doing 2 days a week, and Dr. Oldenkamp is doing 1 day a week. Their schedules are pretty full.
Pretty full.
And they're looking to increase Dr. Oldenkamp to 2 days a week. And also, we were just talking today about how we can spread it. Right now, it's happening on the same days, so how we can spread that out so that it's actually 4 days a week rather than 2 days a week for patient candidates.
But it seems that we'd be able to use the schedule like to spend, soak up visits and such. Is the hope that eventually that's a full-time practice? Can Ellensburg support that?
Strictly on demographic data, possibly. But we have the advantage with the staffing that we have that we aren't really feeling pressed to expand the services unduly. We don't have the full time that we have to be busy. So Carrie and I have had conversations with some of the providers where I'm sure they think we're dragging our heels, but I want to make sure we don't expand those services faster than we can support them.
Cautiously dragging our heels.
Yep. I just want to make sure that there is in fact an ongoing demand.
The financial sustainability group will also be looking at that in the next review, business review. So this is under information.
I've heard a lot of great feedback in passing about how wonderful it is to have that service in the county and to not have to drive to Yakima and in Yakima as well. So I'm really full most of the time. So
I would just like to mention, and I'm sorry that it missed the agenda, but we had a retirement celebration for Jean.
That was what I was thinking.
I'm just a thunder stealer. years. So, but no, just outpouring really thanks and thinking about all of Jean's done for the community is pretty overwhelming today. But go ahead.
So, Jean Yoder was in the first graduating class of geriatric nurse practitioners from the University of Washington 22 years ago. Came here with one of her classmates who was already established here and started working regularly at Royal Vista, and what was then probably not yet Gold Leaf, the facility that's now Prestige. She shared with us today how she rode her bike from what is now the quality office up to Radio Hill and out to Mountain View. She basically did that with Dr. Solberg for just the two of them for about the first 11, 12 years. 9 years ago, we brought in Anna Collins as a second GNP. We expanded coverage into the assisted livings and into home visits. Now, 22 years later, what Jean started is a program with 4 providers. We're expanding services to cover high-risk discharges from both skilled nursing and from the hospital, and potentially from the emergency department. It's really, it's kind of one of the things that is very, very fashionable and trendy in healthcare right now, is to talk about the importance of deploying APCs, community paramedics to make house calls, and to think that Jean really pioneered that 22 years ago is humbling. It was a lovely event, and the good news is that Jean's going in her, because we in this community don't know how to retire, Jean will be available as per diem for vacation coverage and the like. But it really kind of was a milestone day in terms of the community.
Any questions?
So I would like
to...
you
wanted to talk about...
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the CEO, CMO Safe Table Julie and I attended a couple of weeks ago. We heard about a 2.5-hour presentation by Dr. Mickey, and I just blanked on his last name, T-R-O... Okay, I feel better. His last name is Trout. And I took the liberty of downloading all of his slides. Actually, most of what is going to be in this, it's going to be very quick. I want to share a little bit of the data that he had that really described the challenge to provider well-being in the workforce. But more importantly, some of the points of leverage that we as leaders have available to us to make a difference on that. All right. Okay. Straight up.
Is it on?
Oh. So I figured. There we go. So. Pardon?
Lisa, would you like turning the lights down?
So, what we heard is based on work from Stanford on a model of well-being that has a few focus points. Kind of the traditional point to start is talking about the resilience of the providers, and that's really something that as an institution we don't have a lot of impact on. We do have more of an impact on our own culture and our own practices. He made the point there's a bunch of reasons to say that burnout is important, ranging from suicide rates to burnout is associated with increased incidence of diabetes and heart disease, to just docs that are burnt out make mistakes. Some of those reach patients, some of those don't. This isn't something that, gee, you have to be damaged to go into medicine. And this was actually one of the more interesting slides he had. The blue is kids graduating college going to medical school. The orange is age-similar college graduates. So before they go to medical school, medical students are about 25% less likely to have symptoms of burnout, and about a little more than half as likely to have symptoms of depression. When they get to training, that changes. So by the time you're a fourth-year medical student, the rate of burnout has doubled. The rate of depression has more than doubled. For residents, burnout goes up, depression goes down. The two are not identical. It turns out, and we're going to talk a lot about this in a minute, the best prevention against burnout is professional fulfillment. This last blue line is early career physicians who've been in practice less than 5 years. And so you can kind of see that once you get some control in your life, things tend to improve. But it's still worth asking how we got from here to here. Part of it is asking docs to do things that give them no joy. This slide I copied for a couple of reasons. In an observational study in 2016, providers spent 1/3 of their workday face-to-face with patients, which is what they all want to do. That 1/3 number is kind of interesting. We'll come back to that in a minute. The other implication of this is that if I'm seeing patients 7 hours a day, and that's 1/3 of my day is now 21 hours. So clearly there's something that's happening here because none of us are working 21 hours. It feels like it, but it isn't happening. I suspect what's really happening is that that is 5 to 6 hours, and that is 3, 4, because that's all you can do. So this is looking at state versus national numbers. This is actually something that got Stanford's attention. About 6 months ago, every provider in the state got a survey, and response rate was on the order of 20%. What they found was that nationally, the benchmark for physician burnout is 36%. In Washington, it's 43%. APCs are virtually identical numbers. Sense of fulfillment, which isn't surprising based on what we just said, is just about the opposite. 41% nationally, 34% in Washington. APCs, this looks better. Look, we hit the national average, but that's just because the national average for professional fulfillment for APCs is 10% or 10 points worse than it is for docs. So this is where we start getting to the interesting part. What can we do to foster fulfillment? And it turns out that leadership support can impact on 4 huge variables that affect a sense of fulfillment. We can make sure that our values are aligned, that we're incentivizing the behaviors that are important to the providers and to the community. One of the numbers that we heard about values alignment, and this is one that got Julie's attention, is if you can find out what the organization needs and what somebody's passion is, there's an opportunity for alignment. The example that was given was a doctor who had a fair amount of diabetes in her practice, but really felt good about the care she gave for diabetic patients. What they found was that by aligning her schedule so that 1 full day of her life was just diabetes clinic, she found passion and joy in that 25%. And it turns out that based on the Stanford data, if you can find something that gives somebody that joy, that energized feeling, 20% of their time, their sense of fulfillment goes sky high. It's not a dose effect, so that if you give them 50%, they don't feel more fulfillment than if they have 20%. So it becomes manageable. It's not an exercise in indulgence. And it's an exercise in playing to the strengths of your people. One that I found particularly interesting was the role of gratitude and what a culture of gratitude meant in terms of fulfillment. Control over the schedule. That may be, for instance, again, the example of the provider who is able to say, this is my diabetes day. Or it may be that going back MultiCare's take on this data was they wanted to give 10% of that time back to their providers.
That's actually a strategic objective of MultiCare, is to find 10% of the provider's time and give it back to them by increased efficiency and additional support.
And in terms of practice efficiency, that makes sense, but it also, if you reduce this, you can hold this constant, get more efficiency, and people can actually, doctors, providers can take care of themselves. And lastly, peer support. Do you feel isolated, or are you part of a network, part of a team? We've seen this in other settings where providers talk about how much more rewarding it is in team-based practice. It's part of the drive behind patient-centered medical home. This is interesting. The blue dots represent the different health systems in the state. Because of the size of the numbers, they lumped all of the rural and critical access hospitals together. But it turns out that we landed just about on that green dot. We just about hit the average. The interesting thing is that essentially nobody in the state is doing better on both burnout and fulfillment than the national average. One of the things that I think is exciting about talking with Jim Cunningham is that Swedish is one of these dots, which tells me that the way that they are incentivizing their providers, the way that they've created their culture, is giving a greater sense of fulfillment and is helping against burnout. They were actually one of the top 3 performers in the state on the data we saw. This is just a way of thinking about what we can do to impact burnout. There are 3 things we can change. We can increase their sense of control, provide a sense of control. We can increase their sense of being supported and part of a team. And we can look at what are the demands on their time. What that means is that we don't, this can be held constant as long as we provide enough of this. This is the other one that I really liked. This was looking at an instrument that measured gratitude and looked at what percentage of people felt they were so first they divided it by quartiles for gratitude and then looked at what percentage of providers in each quartile felt a high sense of fulfillment. In the words of one of my favorite epidemiologists, this is what we statisticians like to call a straight line.
How do you define gratitude? I mean,
and who does it come from?
It's without getting into the psychometrics, it's a concept that's built on both subjective reports of being appreciated, of Likert scale type measurements of a sense of gratitude for your environment. It's both the expression of gratitude and feeling appreciated.
By patients, by colleagues, by administrators, or
yes,
all of the above?
All of the above. So one of the exercises that they did was instructed providers to keep a journal for 4 weeks of things that they were grateful for or things that people expressed gratitude for. A second group was told to basically write down their random wine of the day. And a third group was told to draw pictures. You don't have to do it. What they found at 4 weeks was that the group that documented gratitude had higher fulfillment, higher satisfaction, and that persisted for 6 months after they quit doing the journaling. So that it was a point intervention, essentially, that had durable effect.
Back on the slide you had with the 4 variables where it was professional, that one. It seems to me the gratitude is the most subjective of the 4. The other factors that come into play are ones in which you can demonstrate at least some control over schedule or even peer support. I mean, the interaction that people have, and it's got an R-square 4.45.
That's for the model.
Right.
Yeah. So, and there are defined interventions, and when we start meeting to look at compensation and values, it may be worth deconstructing that to see how we can operationalize it as leaders. But on this side, support is a huge determinant of the employee's sense of gratitude, the provider's sense of gratitude. I found these empowering because what you're looking at here is that leadership can make a huge difference on values alignment, on a sense of gratitude, and on peer support. And you would think that would be the one that would be the most impacted by leadership, and yet that's...
Are those correlation coefficients?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is factor model.
So one of the things I found really interesting about this presentation, and I've been intimidated by this entire committee idea of putting together our shared incentives and values, because I have always seen it as a win-loss discussion. You know, we're going to argue over what productivity needs to be. And this really did bring it forward as a practice efficiency is one of the things that has the greatest impact on a physician's sense of fulfillment. And it really, it presented the information in such a way that culture becomes a part of the equation, not something that you have to give up in order to get sort of practice efficiency. And one of the examples that really hit home with me is the electronic health record is not something, KBH alone is imposed on docs. It's something that universally is getting in the way of them having a good day with their patients. So you have this sort of this issue. You want support right there to get through it so that they get back to the patients and make things as efficient as possible. And yet support for that is going to another computer, putting in a help desk ticket, and waiting for a response. Whereas if this is the most aggravating thing the doc has to deal with, put the support right there. And so it was just a new way for me, because I had always seen it as we're going to sit at the table and wrestle about work RVUs. And what I heard at this is that's not the job of minimizing burnout and helping physicians and providers feel more fulfilled.
So in this model, the 3 big factors that they identified, they describe them as interrelated. So that increasing these will tend to increase personal resilience. If you feel supported, if you feel like you're empowered to take care of yourself, if people are helping make your job easier, then you're going to be stronger. It's interesting talking about support in the EHR. As I was going back through some of the data that Nikki used to pull this together, I found a paper that was entitled Date Night with an EHR. And what it described was, it was an instrument that looked at the time physicians spent on the EHR by the day of the week. And it turned out that, Monday through, Monday through Friday, you saw work hours, off hours. On Saturday, you saw daytime hours, and then about 9 o'clock at night, there was a peak. And if you're spending almost as many hours during the day on the weekend, plus 8 to 11, you're not taking care of yourself. You're not feeling supported because you're doing it at home. And there is nobody, to Julie's point, that when you hit the glitch is going to be right there. My last job before I came here, I worked in a company where when you ran a service ticket, IT would call your desk phone without warning. And if you didn't answer your desk phone, the ticket was closed.
Save money that way.
I didn't feel loved and supported. And I was one of IT's favorite docs because I didn't yell at them much. And I knew how to reboot a computer before I called them. But I think as we're going into these conversations about how do we structure our support for our docs, how do we incentivize our docs, how do we work with our docs to give more care, better care, and take care of themselves, I think this for me was empowering because this said there are things that leadership can do to make a difference. Is the board familiar with the term the quadruple lane? Everybody knows the triple lane. But I think this really gives us a way to start to address the fourth lane.
Did they speak at all about actual examples that have proven effective that other organizations are doing that have increased the fulfillment and gratitude?
I haven't gone back through, so I gave the example of the gratitude journal. A lot of this was a summary of a body of research data, and I haven't gone back through all the primary data. The one slide that I showed, the one piece that I went back through was they showed us the piece showing medical students are relatively well off until they get to medical school. And we were told that, but we weren't shown the data. I had to go back and I found that. I haven't really gone through the rest of his resources. He actually had 63 slides, and they were very well cited. So there is a lot of information to be gleaned from this. A lot of this also came from a piece in the, it's a think tank called the New England Journal of Medicine Catalyst. And about twice a month, they come out with a survey, and they will ask people, providers around the country, what is your experience with blank? And so April 2017 was when that publication dealt with this. That's actually the source for that figure, and that's the citation for it. There is a lot to be gleaned from the Catalyst. I participate in it, and I wind up getting a white paper about every 2 weeks that I can make this white paper available to the board. There's a couple other ones that you might find interesting as well as we get ready to have conversations about compensation.
Do you suspect that in your primary resources that there might be lists of evidence-based interventions that other organizations have tried?
I doubt it. I don't think that the literature is that mature. What I'm expecting to find is one-offs. We performed X intervention and reassessed it time Y and found blank.
But I do think, and again to the multi-care committee commitment, the strategic commitment to look for 10% in the provider's day. And that's not time for the provider to put their feet up on the desk. That wasn't the point. The point was to take the pressure off, find ways to improve efficiencies, and improve that patient case center. But the other one, I think it was Olympic Medical Center, is actually having conversations, contract conversations with their doctors, leading with what's your 20%? Where do you, because if you have diabetes is your great love and you have 2 every day of the week, you don't feel that. If Tuesday is your diabetes clinic day, you always have that to look forward to. And they're actually having contract discussions and asking that question in that way. What's your 20% and how can you build that into your practice? not that we're asking you to do less, not that we're, but how do we organize your practice in such a way that it meets your need and not so much the need of the organization?
And Erica, to your point, I think the collaboration of the organizations that were present in that conference room, there are a lot of things there that could be researched. Stanford's done some of the research, but given that a lot of it is going to be culture specific, you can get ideas, but I don't know that you're going to be able to come up with something with as solid as evidentiary base as metformin for diabetes. But the culture of appreciation, I do want to deconstruct that variable and look at how we can impact that. Because a lot of that is going, my sense is that a lot of that is going to come down to humane treatment of each other in the workplace and getting away from the pressure, the stress, and recreating a sense that we're all in this together.
It's going to take a special touch to turn that into a deployable policy and still maintain the humility of it, I think. So it's not something that's foisted upon people or feels contrived, but it is genuine.
So one of the things that, and it's a slide I deliberately left out, mainly because it didn't have our name on it, but it had the name of just about every other care system in the state on it, but was a plot showing fulfillment decreasing and compared to state and national averages. And again, the rural hospitals and ACOs were just about the Washington average. But there were some people on the far end that had some really, when you look at the left side of that plot, there's no reason you can't be on the left side. The other thing I'll point out is that as you look across the x-axis there, size is not a predictor of fulfillment. Rural versus urban is not a predictor.
FQHCs were all in
there's FQHCs at both ends of that graph. There are major provider systems at both ends of that graph. There are academic centers at both ends of that graph. Which tells me that there's a lot of it that comes down to the approach of leadership and the leadership team. And Eric, I think you're right. It's going to take the right touch, but there's no reason to think that we aren't capable of that.
I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel, so there's still some wheels out there for examples for us.
Well, if there were, we wouldn't be talking about a 34% national burnout rate. We wouldn't be talking about healthcare providers as having a leading suicide rate in the nation.
I do think that awareness, though, we did an exercise where the job was to list all the things that would negatively impact a physician in their practice, and an awful lot of them felt really familiar. An awful lot thought, wow, that probably felt that way, taking control away, changing staff, blowing things up. So some of it is just awareness and respect for that.
Well, and a trivial example, and I've made light of it, but when I go to FME, because I'm only there as a point two now, I never know who my team's going to be. I never know what pot I'm going to be in. And it's not a huge thing, but it is unsettling. And it was uncomfortable when I took my stuff off of my shelf and had it heavy to make room for another provider. We do that without intent or thought a lot. We decide who's going to work with somebody. We decide for them. And I just think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I think that's a national statement. I don't think that's specific to KVH. I think it's not the first time that this organization has been out in front. For an organization this size, the quality work that is part of the culture here is kind of remarkable. And I don't think this is any different. I think there's a real opportunity here. And I think we're probably as well or better equipped than any other rural hospital in the state to tackle it. just because the people in this room.
So what, moving forward, what does the future look like as far as addressing implementation, research about this issue?
Well, we've talked about the committee, and I think part of the work of that committee is going to be to receive and digest a lot of the information that you're asking for. Eventually, it's going to involve a broader base of staff, leadership, and providers, and we're going to create those answers together. I think one of the things we have to get away from, one of the things that I have to get away from is the mindset that I know what's going to work. And we're going to discuss, part of that culture is going to be the shared creation of what it is that we as a community of providers, as a community of healthcare workers value. And how do we best work together to do that?
One of the examples that was about developing physician leadership, and I've reflected on the number of times when something happens in the clinic or happens, and I grab Dr. Martin and Carrie Barr and we rush in to fix it. Well, there are physician leaders that were circulating when we do that, and we're undermining that very peer support, that very team that we're trying to build within the clinic. So working with physician leaders to be leaders in their clinic and in their practices, I think it's something that struck me I haven't spent enough time on.
To give them the opportunity to succeed and feel satisfaction.
And to create that culture, that's their practice.
And that actually, again, as I was looking through some of the background material for this, it has been called out as one of the unintended consequences of moving from the private practice model to the employee physician model. Is, when I started in practice 20 years ago, the most valuable asset in practice was my time. If I was in the exam room, that door was inviolate. I hired who I worked with. I decided when I was going to work. But I also lost a lot more sleep. I also, frankly, paid a lot of overhead. So there are trade-offs. And I don't think Einstein said we can't understand the pitfalls of any technology until we've invented it. And I think that's what we're discovering now with the models of care that we're delivering, is that there are costs that we didn't expect or understand that we need to address.
Okay. Any additional questions?
No, I think it certainly sets a context for some very interesting questions and discussions to pursue. I'd be interested in that sort of area dealing with the leadership physician. I'd be interested in how pervasive that would be among the medical staff, because I would guess that there are going to be some who don't want to be engaged in leadership. I mean, to them, it's a far different situation, and in some sense, they'd rather have others make decisions.
Absolutely.
In specific areas.
There are some docs that if we told them we can make your practice 10% more efficient and give you back 10% of your day, especially your after hours day, would say, far out, where's my bike? There are some that would say, great, I get to make a softball game. There are some that would say, great, I get to read up. There are some that say, great, I get to go to a board meeting.
I don't think anyone's going to say my 20% is policy and procedure. Can I please be more? I don't think we're going to do that.
You might be surprised on that one.
Do you intend to go through the similar exercises that the two of you went through in listing the detractors to satisfaction? Do you plan to do that with the providers?
I think that would be an interest. I think we ought to do it with the committee. I think it has potential. One of the things that I know they were going to try to get to that we ran out of time on is, okay, now that you've come up with a list of what you can do to destroy it, how can you create it? And what are the things you avoid as Julie said, when we made our lists, I thought about, I've got mine on my desk, I could read it, but it's frankly embarrassing to me. Because I could look at it and say, oh yeah, I did that. And so it might be a useful exercise for the committee and then later for the broader base. But that would be part of the facilitated conversation that we want Jim to have.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I just want to mention, a couple of years ago, we used to have all provider meetings, with a dinner up at the region. And that was good to have interchange with other people, other providers, organizations all getting together. That was a big positive.
What happened? Right. It's no longer, you don't do that anymore?
It was a practice that it became kind of focused on where's the organization going, and a lot of it became about the MOB.
Yeah.
And so I think it kind of fell by the wayside a couple of years ago, but it's certainly something that we used to have them quarterly, and we should reinstitute.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Right, next up is Libby with the CFO.
Okay. We've got the written report here. As you saw, it was a pretty good month revenue-wise and volume-wise. We did have, it was alarming that our AR days came in at 112, but we've been working very hard to address that. And what I'd actually like to do is spend more time on the additional supplemental information that I provided related to the AR, if that's okay.
Sure. People on the board may have questions about that, the other stuff. So we can talk about that first.
We are aware, obviously, I think you remember we've been but we've talked for months from the very beginning of Cerner that there likely could come a time when our AR days would perhaps pass 100, and I think even Julie had mentioned a couple times where she knew of organizations where it was 140 to 150. And I think we talked all along that we did not want that to happen. And as you recall, we made strategic decisions as far as borrowing money and borrowing to refinance the MAC building so that we would have the cash reserves to weather that should we reach that point. The month of October was concerning because we did reach 112 days in AR for the hospital. We still have, I think, we're still strong in the cash reserve side, but again, because we made those strategic decisions some time ago. But when we had our meeting with the Finance Committee on Tuesday, the Finance Committee really felt it was important for us to provide some context to this, what some of the issues were, which have resulted in the 112 days, and what we're actually doing to address it. So that's why we did this additional report. And I think we've talked about a few of these things, and I don't necessarily want to read it, but I do want to make the point. So there are two big components here. I could say that it starts at registration, but I'm not going to. I'd rather start with when the patient's being seen or when the service is being provided. There's the documentation and coding piece of this. In our previous systems, particularly in ED and the clinics, the systems prompted providers to select certain codes in their process or documentation. The new system doesn't do that. So it's more time consuming, but as Julie pointed out, and I think as Carrie agreed, it's actually more accurate. But it takes getting used to and to take the time. Also, we have encouraged communication between coders and providers to ensure the documentation supports the levels of service. This adds time to the coding process. I think once this is hardwired into the system, it probably will not take as much time, but it takes time to build that trust between the providers and the coders. A key thing, and you'll be able to see it in some of the numbers here in the next page. We had an engagement with an initial vendor to assist us with coding, and that engagement was not satisfactory. They were able to have some impact on coding, which again you'll see on the next page, but it was at tremendous cost to us, and we did not trust that they were charging us. We felt they were charging us far beyond the resources that they were providing. I think we had 2 months of bills that were $190,000 each month, and they said they were providing us 9 to 11 coders. I didn't believe that, because if they had been providing that, we would have been in a different place. They could have been providing us that, but those coders were not doing what we needed them to do then. And as I understand it from our HIM director, there was a lot of, we had to go back and educate coders in some cases to understand the system. So we made a decision to fire that firm. We did not want to use them any longer. And so we actually fired them mid-August. And then we, in our conversations with our Cerner support representative, she had suggested a different partner to use, or a partner of Cerner's to use with this, and we started using them in early October. We engaged them in early October. They weren't able to actually get fully in the system until probably mid-October. So I'd like you to look at, if we could go look at the second page, the hospital accounts receivable balances and AR day trend. I think you will see very clearly that transition. If you look along, we were sort of maintaining in the 80s, high 80s, but then when we terminated that contract with the initial vendor, that shot us up to 99 days. And then we brought them in mid-October, and we weren't able to get back to that previous level. So I don't think that it was that they did nothing, but they didn't do, for what we were paying, they didn't do what we would have thought they could do for us. I want to point out that I have columns for the AR, but I wanted to point out the gross revenue as well. And I think it's important to understand, even with those AR days growing, we are still addressing billing, because if you look at that column, for example, in the month of August, you can see that we generated almost 11,000 of gross revenue. The AR balance in that month actually went down. So we were bringing down 11 million. Pardon? 11 million. Did I say 1,000? Yeah. Sorry. Okay. In September, when again we didn't have that resource, we generated 10 million, and in that case we weren't able to deal with all of that. So the AR balance went up about 3.6 million. And then in October, I think we saw the full, sort of a full effect of that, not being able to deal with that. So our AR balance went up 4 million. But we are actually, we're not adding, we are dealing with some of the revenue that's flowing through. We're not, it's not that nothing is happening, it's just that it's not happening fast enough. So we went back and talked about, okay, what do we do here? What are the things we should do? We did, as I mentioned, we did bring on a different resource for coding. And as they are actually catching up with claims, or the coding piece, that drops into the billing department. And if the billing department is all of a sudden got twice as many claims that they need to process, they can't get on top of that. And so, as I noted here, we have a very large amount of unbilled claims at the end of October. It was 13 million, which is a lot.
Any idea how many claims that is?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. No. I know that we had, I think we had outstanding, a few days ago we had about 6,000 outstanding claims. So, the revenue review, we have a revenue review that we instituted several months ago, and it's a cross-functional group. And they have been, and this is something that's standard with an implementation, they've been reviewing revenue as it comes across daily so that they can, or I think it's usually now, so that they can identify where there have been errors in how charges are mapped, but also where they can identify, hey, it looks like we missed some charges here. That review itself identified that we had not been billing for surgery assists, which we had done previous to Cerner. And so we were able to go back and rebill those claims. So, but rebilling those claims then takes the staff away from the primary billing to do a rebilling of the claim. Yes?
Have you considered, I'm sure you have, increasing billing support along with the coding support? Sorry, did I miss that in there?
That's okay.
No, that's under the action
next,
plan.
yes.
Oh.
And then the other thing, and I know I have talked about this, we had a file that was not properly set up, interfacing to a third party that we use to bill our self-pay. And so that's been problematic. We finally got it working, I think, within the last month and a half. The reason that that's an issue is that as long as we were not able to move that work off to the third party or the other vendor we were using, that meant our staff had to work that as well and send statements out to the self-pay people. That is now working, so we removed that piece of work from our staff. So our action plan is, we had initially planned on using the augmentation to the coding staff actually through the end of November, early December. We've decided to go ahead and extend that augmented coding staff to January. We are also adding temporary resources to the billing departments through February to assist in dealing with the backlog of claims.
So when you say temporary resources, you're talking about people?
Yes.
Okay, that was the mistake.
Yes, and I will say we don't want to hire permanent FTEs because once we get more stabilized, we'll want to look at what is it that we really need. And it's a different system than what we had before. So the kind of staffing we had before, the staffing complement, may well be different with Cerner than it was with Paragon and NextGen.
Well, what's the goal for AR days?
Well, I would think we'd want to get it back to where we were, which is 45 to 50 days.
How long do you think that'll take?
I think it will be sometime, it won't be early next year, but I would hope certainly by third quarter. Do you think that's realistic?
I think so too.
Yeah.
And we just, this past week, our new revenue cycle manager started.
Yes. And she is excellent, and she's the one that said this third bullet point, focus on billing payers with quick payment turnaround. For example, Medicare. Medicare typically pays within 15 days. So we should be focused on getting those bills out so we can get paid right away. That's going to bring down AR. And as you'll notice with one of the next graphs in the accounts receivable by payer, 38% of the AR is Medicare.
So do you think we've topped out on AR days?
Now, that's a difficult question. I will tell you, we've been monitoring it. And as I told Julie earlier today, I mean, it looks like we're going down a little bit from 112 for November. It looks like, as of today, it looks like we're probably more like 108, 109. I would expect to see it. December is a difficult month, but I know we've encouraged the revenue cycle folks to get those extra resources on quickly because, you know, we have staff that will be off during December. We want to make sure that we've got people working everything because of the holidays. December is a difficult month. So,
yeah, I guess, I mean, if our goal is to get down to 45 by maybe second quarter or third quarter of days, I guess I'm wondering how high up you could get.
So I think a lot of these issues are systemic, and once they're fixed, everything is slow. And we were seeing some of that earlier on. I think there's also, this is something we talked about in finance, you don't want to sacrifice collectible revenue just to get those AR rates down. It is important that you continue to work the coding, make sure that you're coding appropriately and capturing charges appropriately. So just sending out bad claims so that you can get AR down is not where we want to be either, right?
No, yeah, we want it done well and.
So I'll be more cautious. I'll say third quarter. It would be wonderful if it was sooner. I am very pleased with the new revenue cycle director. I mean, she's diving in there. She's got some great ideas. I think there's really energy there. And where she came from, Cadillac, when they implemented Epic, it was what? 143 days. So it's, I'm not saying that to say don't worry about 112, because believe me, I worry about 112. But I am cautiously optimistic that we have stabilized as far as we're not going to go any higher.
Just to clarify, that's average care days?
Yeah, average days. Right.
Did you have any additional questions?
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I want to say that we spent at least an hour in Finance Committee, and then yesterday in Financial Sustainability, another hour talking all of this through. And Roy and I have both been very worried and concerned. And at the recent board meeting, we had discussed some anxieties about finance, but I felt reassured that our course of action was appropriate. And I personally believe that it will be sooner than the third quarter. It seems to me that the one piece, adding temporary resources to doing is absolutely crucial. Because Deb Bruner, who had been the head of that, took almost a year off because of family illness, and she hadn't worked with the new system.
She's learning it now.
She's learning it, but
yes,
it just seems to me to be prudent to, if we spend even more than this for temporary assistance, to really put our efforts right there now. And as Julia said, it's systemic. So once we get parts of the system well-oiled and moving, then the cohesive system as a whole is perfect.
Yes. So my prediction is I think we're going to get back down to the 80s. The grind is going to be getting from the 80s back down to the 50s.
So I'm curious to know, I don't know if there's some nifty buttons you can push to generate different statistical data. Median days accounts receivable, would that be significantly different? There's some claims that are super long out there, or they're really outliers skewing the data at all.
I think with the number of claims that are out there, median might be helpful. But it would be interesting to look at.
Some of that, if you look on this last graph, some of that.
Yeah.
What's the midpoint?
That's what made me wonder the lengthy ones out there.
I mean, you can just really see I kept likening it to the 80 games, taking the Python, the whole thing, that it gets through coding and now it's moving to the next area. And we had all the extra resources in coding. Well, that's great, but it dumped it all onto the billing people, and so they've got, double the amount of claims to deal with, but they don't have, extra staff to do it. So I'm very confident that we'll be able to continue to bring it down. On a positive note too, it looks like November, from what we can tell, was a very strong month revenue-wise. And also, we've been needing to, because charges haven't come through as they should normally. We've been accruing revenue in the ED department and in urgent care and some other departments. And it looks like, from what we look at today, charges are flowing through on a more timely basis now. These are huge things that the system's working, the way it's supposed to. So once we get on top of it, the billing side of it.
Okay.
And I just supplement that. A point that was made in both of these forums and for discussion was that Cerner has enabled us to see areas where we weren't collecting the revenue that we should be collecting. It's pointed out, because it's a more nuanced system, places where if we get on top of it, we enhance our revenue. And so Cerner, while it may not be able to do, it doesn't have those prompts, that actually is a good thing in a way, because it forces the provider, the physician, to think through the appropriate level of service and code properly. And in sooner has enabled us to see some glitches in our system or places where there are disconnects that we can fix. So I feel optimistic that it's going to be good, but it'll take a long time.
Okay.
I share the optimism Liana has expressed as well. I just feel like we have a more robust understanding of sort of the root causes, and they're identified here, and the action plan is designed to address those. So we will get evidence of that in November, hopefully, but certainly probably January.
Yeah.
So we'll have time to say, wait a minute, what happened here, or great news, keep it going.
Well, as Bob said, this is very helpful, I think.
Good.
Thank you. Any, any questions for Lizzie regarding her report? Thanks a lot.
Great, thank you.
All right, Finance Committee report, yeah.
Well, we spent the bulk of our time discussing the AR days issue, but we also talked about the surplus resolution 1811, which is to sell 2 pieces of a digital mobile arm. This is surgery.
They were sealed.
Yeah, okay.
I talked about how they're used in surgery, but
We physically demonstrated it was not at all. Anyway,
I gave you physical record.
we have we're dispensing with those, but we will get some revenue back if we're able to sell them. So we unanimously passed resolution, we recommended passage of resolution 11.
If no one minds, let's hold off on that resolution until Eric comes
Okay.
back. Maybe move on to Vicky's report.
Can I ask real quickly, with South Carolina on board, our plan was to bring South Florida as a resolution as treasurer at the end of January, the first of January. Sure. Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, we will just put off the resolution until Eric is back, and then we can just talk about that briefly. That's all right. Okay, so then let's start with the operations report. Vicki, Chief Nursing Officer.
Hi. I don't really have a lot to add to my report. I did want to mention that first quarter, we're going to start working on our Philips implementation project, which is the monitoring systems. We'll start just low level in December, but go full bore into January, which will involve all the clinical areas plus quite a few ancillary things too. But other than that, if you have any questions regarding this, I just want to call out one of our employees is leaving next month, so it's got quite a story and a legacy here. We just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Yeah, it's great to read. Any questions for Vicki about her report? Thank you very much. So then at this time, just really quickly before we hear from Rhonda, let's just deal with the resolution 1811, surplus property. Eric, while you're out, we want to talk briefly about this. Do you have any questions about the surplus property?
Well, I move resolution 1811 for disposition of surplus property.
Second from Roy. Any questions, discussion about this resolution? Hearing none, though. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Unanimous, thank you. Thanks for your patience there, Rhonda. Floor is yours.
Okay, I think my only update is under rehab services, and that is to let you know that we have not yet submitted our plans to the Department of Health yet. We've been working to refine those with our vendors, having electricians and heating and air guys walk through the building with Randy and architects to make sure that we've got everything perfect before we submit them. So Mandy makes us get our reports into you really quickly, and so sometimes things that we think are happening are not, and vice versa. So that's my only update.
I just have a quick expression of appreciation of the pharmacy. I went in yesterday to pick up a prescription for my son, who has a acid reflux condition, and the doctor had ordered a prescription, and the prescription was for 90 tablets, and the insurance company would only pay for 60. And so we were discussing what to do with the remaining 30. And the cost for the prescribed 30 was $134. But the pharmacist said, look, here's an over-the-counter medication which is exactly the same as the prescription. And it would cost you, it's $10 for 14 tablets. So 28 is almost 30. So instead of paying $134, he helped me make a purchase of just $24, which I really, or $20, which I really appreciate. Didn't have to do that.
Okay.
Very considerate.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, it was Sal. Sal. He's great.
His brother works for us too. We're very blessed. Yeah, they were students.
Just as an aside, I'll point out that there are 12 states where that conversation is illegal.
Because what reason?
Protect pharma.
Oh, of course. Yeah. They don't even try to dress it up as something else, though?
They just, if you, in these 12 states, if you ask, is there a cheaper alternative, they can answer. But until you ask, they can't volunteer. You know, you could save $100 by getting this over the counter.
Is that a current administration proposal, or is that?
That's state by state.
Okay, thanks a lot, Rhonda.
Who's Dr. Gar? What's the specialty?
He's a neurosurgeon with Swedish.
Okay.
Yeah, he actually works for Pro Alliance that contracts with Swedish.
Great, thank you. All right, on to Carrie Barr, Public Operations.
So you have my report in front of you. The only addition I think I have is under design team for the Medical Arts Center. And this is, Ron Urlacher has found a space in the MAC that will be the same size for the exam room. So we're going to start scheduling some time for doing some mock-up exam room layouts. So this is what the providers are getting to that micro level of design, which is they're really excited about. They're done with the big bubbles. They want to get to where's the exam table and the garbage can. See, you're smiling.
And behavioral.
Yeah. No barns, no nothing. Just simple.
Did the hay bale represent something new that they won't be mocked up in the barn? Or was it just there?
The fact
It was just ambiance.
Yeah. Anyway, so they're excited about it. So I just wanted to add that. That's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. They've decided to have just sort of an open forum with that. They'll rotate through, have silent communication, then come together as a group and hash out the things that don't really match.
Can you remind me what will go into the thinking of Women's Health Space?
So the one that's over, currently nothing's in that space, and it's not slotted.
And it hasn't been slotted for it.
Correct.
And did Dr. Herman move to the Women's Health Space at the MAC?
He has.
Thank you.
People are not having any trouble finding the place. I've seen the ads in the paper about.
Yeah, I had a patient this morning, about 7:30 this morning. Luckily, I happened to be sitting in that vacant space, and was able to direct her to where she needed to go.
Any other questions for Carrie? Thank you very much.
Great.
So thank you all for these really useful, clear, focused reports. They're extremely helpful.
All right, next is the community relations report. Michelle Warren.
Really, the only two things I wanted to add to the report is that on Friday, we're supporting the Ellensburg high school basketball games, free admittance for everyone. So if you would like to attend those with you and your family, they will do a call out, I believe, at the beginning of the game, just asking for anyone affiliated with KVH to stand and recognize us for supporting that event. So that is exciting. And I received an update on the MAC signage just before this meeting. We have made it through city permitting, or expect that to be done within the next day or so. The city has denied the small directional sign that we had coming in. I want to say, is that fine? On the east side of the building, that's actually apparently city property. So we decided that we were just gonna let's see how the wayfinding goes. We don't anticipate that to be a primary access. If once things are going and we're hearing something from the patients, we can have further conversation with the city if we need to. Outside of that, my anticipation is, I know Randy's working on the electrical, and Grayville anticipates they should be up at the beginning of January.
Is that city property or city easement?
I think it's just like part of the right-of-way. Right-of-way is probably not the right word, but it's outside of the sidewalk area.
Michelle, let's explore Ellensburg with Amy Diaz.
So that is something.
Do you know more than I do, right?
Yeah, I can tell you about it. She actually practiced on us this morning. It's actually something Amy's done even before when she worked at the health department, where she goes with the Morgan Middle School students and they review data on the county health data and so what she has worked on right now is looking at county health data or community health data for 8th graders, things that say like, what percentage of 8th graders do you think smoked in the last 30 days or watched television for an hour? And so she took us through that exercise today. I don't know how I did yet, I find out tomorrow, but where they make the groups guess and they talk about what they might do. And so there's some KVH swag that they will receive as prizes for winning. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Any other questions for me?
Speaking of public health, in case we haven't heard, Robin Reed was grandma.
Do you know she's moving on to another opportunity?
She has a family that somehow wants some of her time. I don't know. So she's tough competition.
Anything, any other questions for Michelle? All right, thank you, Michelle. All right, Julie mentioned earlier this Rural Healthcare Leadership Conference. I think a couple people are interested in that. Anything else to say about that, Julie?
It's at the same hotel as it was last year.
I think so. The Grand.
Yeah. I would be interested in going, but
Arizona Grand.
if that unveils.
It's not anywhere. I can sleep anywhere. Anyway, all right, so no old business, on to new business. We have the election board officers. The reason we're doing it this meeting is because the December meeting is early January. This will allow us to do it with the calendar year. So here the three people are up for position. Of course, if anybody would like to nominate someone else, we can do that too. But if people like this slate of officers, then would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move the proposed slate of officers.
Okay. Moved on the other second by Erica. Any questions? Does anyone need a campaign speech or anything? All right, hearing no further discussion, then all those in favor of electing this slate of officers, please say aye. Aye. Unanimous. Thank you very much. I'll try not to go crazy with power. Right. Yeah, I can. All right, so then we have the list of committee members on here for 2019. Of course, if any of this is inconvenient or something, we can shift them around if here's where we are right now. I think it's mostly just maintaining the status quo here. And I think, as far as I've heard, it seems like everyone's fairly happy with how
And I think there's a good reason to maintain the status quo, to get some, build a little bit of history, knowing, being coming familiar with the issues that particular committees have. It's allowed to do that, so I'm quite happy with it.
Okay, and you see toward the bottom there, you have the Provider Compensation Committee, that's going to get up and running soon. And then the NEC Procedures Committee, that's going to be getting done. We have the calendar for 2019. There, we've been talking a bit about that over email. So there will be a board retreat in March there regarding finance. In June, then in conjunction with the Richard Conference, we'll have a board retreat, and I'll talk to you, Julie, more about that. Obviously, this is subject to change, but I think right now this is about where we are. Are there any questions regarding the planning calendar for 2019?
Are we now, for the board retreat, is now scheduled for after Wednesday?
Yes.
And then we'd be able to stay overnight if we...
Yeah, Wednesday afternoon. Any other questions regarding the board calendar?
Do we need to formally adopt that schedule, or it's just good?
I don't know. No, I think it's... Was it?
Wasn't it really?
Okay.
I move the proposed calendar. I second.
All right. Any further discussion? I mean, it's obviously it's open
It can be flexible.
to change. All right. Well, in that case, all those in favor of adopting this calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Well, Mandy, I guess I should ask. Do we have to approve the committees?
That one didn't have a vote.
Okay. Anything else before we move into executive session?
Yeah, I just want to thank Mandy for stepping into a very busy assignment and for a while carrying 2 assignments because the medical staff person resigned and she went back to carry those duties as well. And I think you're doing a great job. So agreed.
Okay, at this point, then we'll recess into executive session. Let's have a break until 7:35. We'll break until then, and then we'll start at 7:35. How long do you think we need?
20 minutes. Honest.
20 minutes. Well, let's give it. Let's say we'll be in executive session until 8 o'clock. That'll give us 25 minutes. Okay. Thank you.